podcast. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And today, folks, we have, I guess, our first show of 2020. I'm not going to make any 2020 hindsight or 2020 vision jokes. Everybody's done that already. But before we start the podcast, we're going to bring in Vicky Hutchmala from the WorldTokenMarket.com. Vicky, how are you today?
Fabulous. I'm doing fabulous today, Ron. Nothing like Vegas when the sun is shining. And, of course, we've got CES in Vegas, so people who live here, we know not to go down by the Strip because there's 150 extra people in the town this week. But we have got an exciting podcast where we're talking to people in the oil and gas industry and how they have used tokens to promote their company, and I can't wait.
Great. Well, let's waste no more time. Let's bring on our guests. Today, folks, we have Alastair Caithness and David Greenberg from Ziyen. Alastair's the CEO and David's the chairman. Guys, you there?
Absolutely. Nice to be on with you guys today.
Yeah. Good to be on again. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, regular subscribers of the Mappable podcast know that we did a podcast with Alastair way back when. So this is kind of like a nice little follow-up on what's going on with the company. And we're going to break some news here on the company because I think that David, you're newly hired there, right? You're a new member of the group.
Yes. No, I just signed on as chairman. Happy to be part of the group. I think it's a great project, great company, great team, and it's going to be a terrific outlook for the future.
No question.
Congratulations, David. Congratulations, and good luck, Alastair, with the new president. Fun times for 2020.
Yes. And before we get into the Ziyen in particular, David, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on yourself and what you've been doing before this opportunity?
Sure. Well, this is really a good fit for me. I was a oil trader for many years on the New York Mercantile Exchange. I was actually one of those guys in the pit that you saw screaming, yelling, getting spit on all day. I spent about 22 years doing that. I was president of one of the largest local clearinghouses that cleared what we called local traders, were people that we only traded our own money, which gave us a much different outlook on the market than most. And then I spent 7 years on the NYMEX board, served on every major committee, either as chairman or co-chairman. And then my final year was on the executive committee of NYMEX, where I was on the team that brought it public. We grew the exchange in my 7 years from a valuation of $800 million. And then when we went public, at the time, it was the largest IPO in decades. We went public. It was a $12.5 billion valuation when we went public. So I have a lot of background in this, as well as trading, risk management, and corporate governance, and most importantly, electronic trading platforms through some of the wildest times of history that kind of relate to some of the things that are going on in today's world.
Wow, that's Alastair, good for you that you found such a qualified person to head your team. You have to have a great 2020 this year with David on board. That's fabulous. Congratulations, David.
Thank you very much. I look forward to a really great adventure with these guys.
And David, with your background in IPO and raising money and everything we just talked about, something about blockchain must have piqued your interest, right? What kind of got you into that?
Well, if you look at the evolution of trading in general or investments in general, the New York Mercantile Exchange started out on a corner with people, doing, trading just from the curbside. Then we moved into, building downtown. Then we're moving into building in New York, the World Trade Center, and then in New York Mercantile Exchange. And then we went from open outcry to electronic. From electronic, we also invented Clearport, which was the next evolution. So what's going on now with the entire, tokenization of the process is really just the next step in the evolution of investing in oil, or being able to trade it in a way that's keeping up with technology. So it was very exciting to me to be from a floor trader to electronic trader to a token, trader and investor. And on a team like this, I just think that it's the next stage. Like in all things, you had the Bitcoin blowout, which people don't realize it's still there. And, like when the happened with the .com era, there was a few companies that survived, and obviously Amazon and E-Trade and Petco and all these things did really well. And I think you're going to see that in the digitalization area too. If you get good teams, not, a bunch of kids in a dorm room, which I think it's great that they're trying all these things. But, we like to say is that we have an amazing depth of background, both legal, regulatory, exchange, technology-wise, and the entire package kind of really, really got me interested in, and I'm excited about what the next steps are going to be.
I wonder
we
what it's going to look like.
certainly believe that blockchain and tokens is the future. It's the next stage and the next step, and it's going to take the financial world and commerce into the future. And when you're at the beginning, you get to create the wheel.
No, you do, and listen, it's got good and bad because you're going to make some of the mistakes and some of the people won't later on. But everything is all about being first to market. And having a vision. Think of Facebook. You could have the best next step to Facebook in the world now. You're not going to compete with them just because they were first to market.
Well,
so I think this is very unique.
Speaking of vision, tell us what the vision of Ziyen Coin is.
Alastair, I'm going to let you take that question. That he's the best one to explain that.
So essentially what Ziyen Coin is it's an ERC20 token, and it really what it is just a small piece of equity of the company. So what we did is, as we were like the first sort of oil and energy company that we've developed a token that represents a piece of equity. So the way it actually works is that every Ziyen coin or token represents a fractional share. So if you're a coin holder or you're a shareholder, essentially the coins are a hundredth of a share, if you think of it like that. So that was really how we've set it up in going forward. When we actually we used the company Polymath, so we had to set it up and went through a number of different stages in terms of its through Regulation D506C is how we're actually issuing these tokens, and Regulation S. And when we set that up, that was really how we actually just formed it itself. So this was the formation of it. So when you think about Bitcoin, we are not like Bitcoin at all. We're a security token. And I think this confuses quite a lot of people when they actually look at what we're doing. So, Bitcoin, I think, to put it in, trying to explain, I'm always explaining it to people, what is the difference between Bitcoin and Ziyen Coin and the blockchain, etc. But the way I sort of explain it is, if you think of your iPhone as the blockchain and Bitcoin was the first app. Now, what's happened is that the technology behind Bitcoin, so when Bitcoin was actually developed by Satoshi Nakamoto, he was actually developing this ability to do a transaction on the blockchain and transfer money from anywhere in the world instantaneously, out with government charges and out with the international border transaction fees. And this was to happen instantaneously. So if you think that if you were doing business in Iraq and you're an oil company and you were transferring money into Iraq, from a U.S. bank, and now I'm based down in San Diego, the money would go to probably New York, then it would go to New York and probably go to London, then London to Zurich, then Zurich over to Dubai, Dubai to Beirut, and then Beirut probably into Baghdad. And now all these banks would take a little chunk of the fees, and this whole process could take 5 days. So what he actually developed when he developed Bitcoin was this ability to do this transaction instantaneously from San Diego to Baghdad, just as an example, and that would happen instantaneously and there would be no transactional fees. But what actually happened is when he constructed Bitcoin, this was basically the sort of source, but it was actually transacted on the blockchain. So really, if you think about that, so Bitcoin was actually a transaction when it first got developed. So what happened was there's only 21 million Bitcoins potentially in circulation. I don't know the exact number right now, how many are out there, but your Bitcoin miners, maybe there's 17 million, and the Bitcoin miners try and find the other coins. But it actually moved from this transaction on the blockchain to becoming its own commodity because there's a finite amount of Bitcoin that can actually come out there. But when it was originally developed, it wasn't developed for this. So he wasn't developing this new commodity and currency, he was doing this transaction. And it's the technology behind it is what we're actually using. So when we are coming up to create Ziyen coin, which is also transacting on a blockchain, but it's on a permission blockchain, whereby all the parameters are controlled, and we're just using the technology of this decentralized ledger, this centralized ledger rather than a decentralized ledger, to basically start to develop things. So the way I'm looking at it is, for everyone out there who doesn't really understand it, it's a bit like when the internet started, the very first thing was email. Now, 30 years later, we've got 1,000 million use cases for the internet now. And if you ask anyone what they use the internet now, they might say, downstreaming, surfing the web. Very few will say email straight away. So this is like the next evolution of the internet. That's why people call it Web 3.0, is this new technology that David spoke about earlier is now coming into fruition. And really what's happening is we're just one of the sort of new companies that are using it for a different use case than what Bitcoin used it for.
Well, have you found that since the inception of Ziyen coin, which I believe was in July of 2020, are you noticing that there are more people in the world that are now or have become more interested in oil and gas because of the coin that you've issued?
Yeah, because so essentially the coin is represent a piece of equity in the company. What's interesting, what we're actually doing is we're doing percentage of transactions in the coin as well. So the way we're developing it is, initially when we looked at the idea is creating a stable coin. So, this is the new thing, a stable coin, whereby rather than using it as fiat currency, you've got a stable coin out there that you can transact for oil. So again, coming back to this question of doing deals in Iraq and Iran and all these other places, what is the local currency? How do you get the money moved there? If you can actually do a transaction using a coin, there's actually $200 billion a year spent in the oil industry just on transactional fees. So anybody looking at from the market outwards in, they'll all think, well, if I can develop a coin to do these transactions, especially in Africa, Middle East, and other countries that Western banks don't operate, then there's obviously, it's an opportunity. But as we start to delve further into the space, we realized that the problem with that sort of concept is unless the super majors use the coin, then essentially you can develop something that nobody's going to use. So that really stopped us basically developing that idea. And this is how we've sort of evolved with the project itself. So now what the coin is, or the blockchain, what it's going to actually help us do, and this platform that we've developed and what David's helping us take to market, is looking at the oil assets that we have out in the Midwest. So if you think right now a structural deal of an oil well in the U.S. out in the Midwest is you've got the operator, say, owns 50%, the landowner owns 15%, which is quite often the farmer, and then the further 35% is owned by small investors who have non-operating working interest. So this is where people invest into the oil industry. It's quite often tax breaks for this. And they have a non-op interest. And, you're producing wells in the U.S. will produce for, say, 20 years. So if you own 2% of a project in Kentucky and it was producing, say, 300 barrels a day, then, you might be getting a monthly check from the oil company for, say, $1,000. Now, this can go for, say, 2 years at $1,000, then maybe the production drops down, and you might be getting $700 for, say, the next 20 years. The problem that what we're trying to solve is that now you've got this asset that's giving you money. It's like, how do you actually sell it, and what's the value of that asset? Now, under the current structure of the oil industry, you've got this working interest, your 2%, and say you've had it for 5 years, but then for whatever reason you want to sell it. You need to find someone in the world who wants to buy your 2% of your non-op working interest in this oil project, and then what's the valuation of that? So what essentially we're about to do is we're going to take the oil producing asset, we're going to drop it into an SPV, which is a special purpose vehicle, but for all purposes it's like an LLC. So we're taking the oil asset, we're putting it into an SPV, and then we're tokenizing that on the blockchain. So rather than actually having your working interest held by, I've got 2%, I've got 1.4%, or whatever your percentage of the field is, you've now got this in token format. And then what we will have is a secondary trading platform whereby you will now have this opportunity to actually trade your working interest through tokenization on the blockchain. So it's really, I would say it's not so much a technology solution, it's more a market space solution. So if you think there's hundreds of thousands of people out there who've got working interests in projects that they can't sell, what we're doing with this platform is essentially by tokenizing each product or each project on a project-by-project basis and creating them to a token or a coin, it's the same thing really. And then essentially we're providing this capability for liquidity. Because when we talk about liquidity here, we're not looking for a market space where there's going to be hundreds of trades happening every day and people making a profit from doing this. Essentially what we're doing in terms of liquidity is we're providing this sort of asset holder or operation holder, non-op working interest holder, this opportunity to actually sell this through tokens. And we're working with a software company out of Houston who will value the asset, will basically track the entire production of the well on the blockchain, will track the production of the oil in the blockchain, and then essentially everything is getting tracked, and at any time they'll be able to go onto this platform and sell their working interest through tokens. And that's really what we've actually evolved the project to do.
So when somebody purchases tokens or purchases Ziyen coins, are they purchasing for a specific project, a specific oil well, or are they just putting their investment into a pot where you just use it where you need it?
Yeah, so there's really two cases here. So Ziyen, so if you think about this platform being like the start of Amazon, so essentially Ziyen coin itself is a piece of equity in our company. Now we're doing deals in Ziyen coin to acquire small working interest in these projects with the operators. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a token for each of these operators on a project as well. So essentially what Ziyen coin's representing is just an equity piece in the company, and we're acquiring small percentages in these projects, but we're also creating the tokens for the operators themselves so they can get the liquidity for their investors. So by us developing this platform, and it's a joint venture that we've gone into this platform with, so we've realized that's the way to solve the problem. But if you think the security token market right now only has 7 tokens trading, and that's, I think, 6 in open finance and 1 in T0. In 12 months from now, once we start onboarding projects, essentially we could basically be dominating the token market space, because we could create maybe 500 tokens on a project-by-project basis. And unlike the ICO market, the initial coin offering market, where they're developing these coins backed on nothing, the reason why these exchanges like Open Finance and T0, like our project, is essentially we're creating a coin that's backed by oil and gas assets. But it's just not oil and gas. We're going into renewable energy assets as well. So you've got assets and you've also got distributions connected to it.
Oh, excellent.
So
excuse me.
So I envisage us, potentially over the next 2 years creating, over 500 tokens. But unlike the ICO market, whereby, 99% of all these ICOs have failed, essentially outside Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, and there's a few, all our coins are going to essentially be successful because they're based on, we're just changing the format of oil projects and putting them into this,
Right.
So they're not going to basically fluctuate the same way as Bitcoin does, because the maximum valuation of this coin will essentially go to the maximum production that this field can go to, So it can't go scooting way up, because if the field's only got so much oil and you're only going to get to a production of, say, 500 barrels a day, then essentially it's creating a market cap for each token going forward. But we're not, and there'll be opportunities when people get smart on how to make money of investing in these tokens early and selling them at peak production. But ultimately, the way it's going to sort of operate is that, what we're really doing is providing the liquidity at the back end for these investors. But if you suddenly start to think about, we spoke about in our last podcast about this, unlocking the capital markets. But if you think that's exactly what we're about to do, we're just going to be unlocking the way the capital market of oil and gas is structured right now. We're changing this to token format. And, the way we envisage it happening is that rather than us having one underlying Ziyen coin that's going to be used across the oil industry, we're going to create this platform and create these on a project-by-project basis. And what Ziyen coin is going to have is a small percentage of every single project we bring onto the platform, anywhere between 1% to 3%.
Oh, okay. Well, so let's get back to David now, and let me ask you something, David. What do you think Ziyen coin, what kind of impact is that going to have on the oil and gas industry as it is or as it was, and where it's going to go in the future?
Well, the major part of what we're trying to do is, again, the majors, have their, they're trading the futures market and everything else. And, I don't believe that we're going to be an impact on the futures market, but we're going to be an impact on the thousands and thousands of individual wellheads that are owned by people that you might never have heard of. And to provide the liquidity to those people and the profitability structure, it's more than just oil. It allows them to have income that they weren't going to have, which allows their lifestyles to get better, which allows their families to live better. So it's really opening up an untapped market that's widely unknown. And when it happens, I think you'll see a very good following by people that have never really even tapped into the oil market. Because most people, they don't trade futures. It's not an easy thing to do. For many different barriers of entry, between opening up an account, between the margin requirements, between the regulatory requirements to be getting a clearinghouse, working it out with the CME and the fee structure. So the average person that might own a piece of a well or a piece of a wellhead, they're not hedging it on NYMEX/CME or playing the market. They're kind of trapped in their own investment. So what this will do is this will allow them a sense of liquidity, and for many, stable assets that are great, but you can't do anything with it because you're stuck in it. This is going to allow them to make some profit on it.
Well, and you're not subject to what's going on in the political world in regard to what OPEC is doing with oil, or what different countries are, how they're impacting it. It's just a investment. It's a relatively stable and secure investment, and that's what most people want. They don't, like you said, they don't want to play in the futures or the commodity futures. That's just, you have to be too much of an expert in that in order to really get a handle on it.
Yeah,
no, I mean,
just
absolutely. I'm sorry. I mean, I was a very rare breed. I mean, like, as tragic as the news that was going on, in the past few days, this was the news that made oil years, trading. But 99.9% of the population, that's not what they're doing. So, Alastair, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was just going to say that, in the U.S. right now, essentially you're an energy exporter. So right now there's 1 million wells in the U.S., but 91% of them are owned out with the super majors. So there's like 900,000 wells in the U.S. right now. So you think that 900,000 wells, essentially, nearly all of them have small investors owning these non-op working interests. And, each project you might have 50, 60 investors in. So you start to see the numbers of the potential people who have these working interests. Now, what we're doing is by creating the token for each project, and if everything all comes onto our platform, then you can see the numbers of people who've actually got this opportunity for liquidity. But as David pointed out, that by us creating this platform, it's going to open up this potential for anyone else out there who's maybe wanting to own oil and gas and wanting to own an asset, which essentially is going to be giving them distributions. Now, when the oil price goes up and down, or they have to do workovers in the well, that's going to affect how much money you're going to be getting in terms of a monthly basis. But realistically, what you're doing is you're acquiring an asset, a long-term asset that's going to give you distributions every month or every quarter or every 6 months, depends how the deal's done with the operator. And then what we're doing is by actually putting this all on the blockchain and tracking it and essentially valuing it through tokenization, we're providing this liquidity for the investors. So we still expect people just to hold on to their investment in the same way they're doing it now. But the reason why they're going to want to use our system and platform is because at any time they want to sell their investment, they've now got this opportunity to do it. And and it's the blockchain and tokenization, which is essentially allowing us to create this model. So you start to see, we're just focusing on the U.S. to begin with. We're not looking overseas. Once we dial it in here, yeah, we'll look to expand it to bring other projects on. But, everything we're doing is sort of SEC regulated and compliant with the U.S. securities and banking laws. So this is why we're focusing on the U.S. rather than going abroad. So the one thing that will affect your token price is obviously the oil price. But what you've seen just now is even with the problems in the Middle East and other things, the U.S. is a net exporter of gas and oil now. So it's not going to be affected in the same way when you're having to import so much oil from Saudi Arabia every day just to keep the economy going.
Yeah, and Alastair, you're talking about the distributions before to investors. Is that something that happens through a smart contract at the tokenization process?
So the distributions will still happen in terms of they'll still be US dollars. So at this stage, we are not looking to do the distributions in tokens. So the distributions will come from into the platform. The operator will give that, and we look to make the distributions paid out in dollars. So we've got an accounting firm that specializes in the blockchain that's going to be coming on board and assisting with that. We're going to be using the company that creates the tokens. They also have a transfer agent, so they'll be involved in that aspect of it as well. So it's not just us that's running this whole thing. We're bringing in the right partners who are operating in the space to assist us with this.
Yeah. So what I'm getting from what you're saying then is the difference between, let's say, a Bitcoin and your token, for example, is, Bitcoin really isn't backed by anything. It's kind of like backed by technology in a way where it's finite. There's a certain amount of coins that are out there, where what you're doing with the STO, with the security token offering, is based on a real-world asset, that there's something there. And I think that was one of the reasons why those ICOs you mentioned all failed, because they were just kind of like, we're just going to bring a bit of an idea, raise money, and then, go to the Bahamas or something.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because if you think of the oil industry is worth $5 a year in terms of so you're thinking that's all the assets behind it, whereby, what we're doing is tokenizing a small percentage of it within the U.S. market space. But realistically, if our model works, and obviously we are first to market, now I'm not saying that we're going to be absolutely everywhere in the world. We'll probably be other countries come in and do something similar if it starts to work. But it gives you the valuation whereby, Bitcoin itself, depending on the price, the highest it's got to in terms of a market cap is like $80 billion based on when it got to $20,000. And, there's that many Bitcoins in circulation. So if you think of the energy industry from an oil and gas perspective, it's like $5 trillion. And then it's obviously got the asset value behind it. I think people don't really, the more I delve into the space, Bitcoin people, I don't envisage them really coming in and investing in this because the majority of them are looking for, fast action cash, and they're into this instant trading. They're not into this sort of long-term aspect of it. So when I speak to Bitcoin people about what we're doing, they have no idea about, Rule 144, whereby, if you acquire Ziyen coin, you've got to hold on to it for 12 months just under that SEC rule, So it's just, so that in itself, they don't really understand. And then, it's on a permission blockchain. So it's these new security token offerings that the SEC have created that what we're doing this. So if you think about the SEC sort of regulating this technology, but really there's a lot of benefits to it in terms of, any company capital raising through tokens, because you can see every token acquisition on the Ethereum blockchain. You can start to, the transparency is much more there than, investing in a startup company, because ultimately, if you're investing in a startup company, you can't actually, you've got to believe how many shareholders they've got in the system, or you've got to wait for their annual accounts or uploads to find out how many holders there are, where essentially you can just go into the Ethereum network and type in the name of the coin, and then you can see every single transaction on it. What's interesting about our coins is you can see all the investors who's doing the transactions, but in amongst all those investors, there's transactions where we're acquiring small percentages of oil and gas projects in it as well.
Yeah, and then you're using the, you said your U.S. Securities laws. Does that mean that your project has to be qualified by the SEC or something SEC related?
Yeah, so it's a Regulation D. So it's just the same way. So it's like Regulation D 506C. That's how the tokens are getting created right now. Regulation S is the other ones. And there's been 2 Regulation A companies raising through the tokens right now. So all the rules with these tokens are the same rules as you would do if you were doing any sort of capital raise with shares. It's just under this new format. So this is, but this is better for the investor, because essentially, it's actually getting qualified, and it's under the SEC rules. Whereby right now, if you go into just an ICO there, it's just, it's usually zero rules. So that's the problem with all these ICOs. There's just no transparency. You're giving money, they're raising money based on a pitch deck, and there's nothing really behind it. So there's been 1,600 ICOs launched since Bitcoin, there's just a handful of them actually working now. The majority of just all went south because there was no real long-term plan, or I think the big thing is there's no assets behind it, or no asset value in what they're doing.
Yeah, so if someone is interested in investing in Ziyen coin, how does that process work? Do you have a PPM that they have to read, or that's available to them? Can they do this online?
So they just go onto the website, and they just make they fill in a subscription agreement. There's a PPM for them to read as well, and they do the subscription agreement, and then essentially, if it's Reg D, they have to, once they make their soft commitment, then we do the accredited investor check, and then they transfer the money. If it's Reg S, it'll just be going through KYCs. We've got a KYC company that checks them for that, and then they just do the investment once that's passed. So it's just like, and then rather than holding it in a share certificate, what happens now is you would set up a MetaMask wallet, which is like an Ethereum wallet. That's the one we're using, is MetaMask. And they would just open that up, and then you can just put Ziyen coin in there, and you just put the Ziyen coin, and then they just get minted. There's the company Polymath that we use it for our minting our tokens. So they just mint the tokens, and then the tokens just go into their wallet, and you can hold your investment. So I think this is why it's an evolution of all startups, etc., whereby right now, if you invest in a startup, you get a share certificate, you've got an ownership, it's sitting in some drawer, right now, if you own Ziyen coin, essentially you have your investment in your phone next to Ethereum. And once we're trading on the Open Finance and T0 exchanges, it'll be the end of this year. You'll be able to either convert your Ziyen coin to crypto or convert your Ziyen coin to fiat currency.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I wanted to buy this, then if I wanted to get involved today, I'm listening to this podcast, I can do that, right? What's the domain? What's the website?
It's just Ziyen.com, Ziyen.com.
Okay. All right. Well, I got one more question for you guys now. Now that it's out there, it's ready, people can do this. How are you getting people eyeballs on this? Are you guys doing conferences? You're walking around like, David, you doing the rounds on this or what?
Well, we're going to start doing the rounds, when we kick in the next round of financing. Alastair has been at some conference, keynote speaking. You're going to see it on a much more high visibility level in the next few months.
No question. And if I was if I was a player in the gas and oil industry, this seems like a no-brainer for me, at least to get information. And is there a good phone number to reach you guys at, or is it email, or just is the website the best?
Yeah, all the information's on the website, so you can go there.
Okay.
We've got a phone number, there's emails, everything that's there as well. I think what's interesting about the project that we're starting to evolve, what we've created is, we're talking about oil and gas, but it's an energy trading platform. So if you think about what we're actually creating is, when we are making these SPVs for people to invest in tokenization, we're already talking to one wind energy company and a solar company right now. So what we're about to do in the next 3 to 6 months is we'll create our first token for a solar project and a wind energy project. So what will happen there is there'll be structures slightly different, but essentially right now, if everyone's wanting to push this Green Deal, climate change is such a massive thing, but you can't, we still need energy on a daily basis to function. What our platform essentially is going to do is we're going to have renewable energy in terms of the actual energy itself. So if you ask someone tomorrow or today, I want to invest in a green energy and I want to invest in the energy itself, you can't actually do this because who actually owns solar farms and how do you buy a piece of that? There's no retail investment for that right now. So it's very difficult. Yes, you can invest in Tesla, you can invest in other green energy companies who make product, but you can't actually invest in the energy itself in the same way we're talking about oil and gas production. So by us tokenizing renewable energy, essentially we're creating an energy platform whereby we believe that what we're about to create will be the blockchain's the catalyst to speed up the transition in energy. See, the thing is, you've got Greta that's going around the world, is doing a good job and just basically raising awareness for things, but there's no actual solution to what she's doing apart from government do more. People actually out there with their, picketing, trying to force things. It's happening in Scotland, it's happening everywhere in the world right now. But this process of how do we speed up this transition in energy? But essentially, if we now develop an energy trading platform whereby we're controlling the distributions of oil, and on that platform, we're actually creating tokens and coins to develop the equity side of these renewable energy fields, a wind farm, a solar farm, not the product, the actual farm itself. Now, people can invest in that. So we think we're going to get mass amount of people interest coming there when we launch our first solar token and first wind token.
I agree.
Because we're now creating retail investment for it. But then on top of that, you're going to have these token holders in oil and gas who are getting money in essentially a monthly basis through this platform. Now, they're going to be able to use those distributions, and they'll be able to take distributions from oil and invest it directly into renewable energy. So you can see where this, by actually having it as an energy trading platform, people will be able to understand that, this is the entire energy that we need, specifically looking at the U.S. going forward. But really, long term, what we're doing is we're starting to merge two energy sources together in terms of the capital structures. And by doing this, we're unlocking the essentially capital structure of oil and gas and the distributions of oil and gas through tokenization, and taking those distributions and essentially allowing these people to invest it directly into renewable energy. And you're bringing all the millions of people out there. If they had an opportunity, I want to be green, I'm going to buy an electric car. I want to be green, I'm going to hang the washing outside instead of using a tumble dryer. It's just like, but if I've got an opportunity where I can actually invest into renewable energy and energy sources, we think this is going to be a huge part of the whole play of what we're doing. So we want to just move away. Yeah, oil and gas is where we've come from, but as we've developed the platform, once we get our first solar farm and wind farm on it, I think that's going to be huge, because suddenly we're going to be creating this platform for the first time ever, whereby you're going to have two energy sources operating on the same platform, and you're going to have this ability to invest in both, and we'll be able to take the profits from oil and gas and essentially invest directly into renewable energy. And that's in the blockchain's basically allowing you to do this, whereby without this technology, how does this transition happen faster?
Phenomenal. Yeah, phenomenal information there. I'll tell you, that's a great idea. I think you guys are really poised well. Vicky, what do you think about this?
I think it's fabulous. I'm wondering, though, are you the only tokens in the oil and gas industry, or are other major companies like Mobil or whomever, have they issued their tokens, or are you just, the first?
I think they're using the blockchain. So if you think about it, use cases, so right now there's the oil blockchain consortium based out of Houston, and that's where all the super majors are now getting involved in the blockchain. So what they're doing is they want to start running projects on the blockchain and using smart contracts, because they're wanting to remove invoicing. They want to go everything to be, once you actually provide a product to the field or the project, then you automatically get paid, the transaction's executed just like a smart contract operates. So the oil majors reckon that they're going to save between 8 to 12% in fixed costs once they can move their entire operations onto the blockchain. Now, they're huge companies. It takes 18 months for anything to get going within those companies because of all for a runway to get that launched. But, they're already working together like they've never worked before, using the blockchain for other use cases. In terms of the token, it's too high risk for them to do that right now, Vicky. I'm friends with a guy, Karn Sood, who's Shell's key blockchain person out of Houston, and then he likes our project. But as he said to me, Shell aren't going to basically create their own token today, because they've got they turn over $500 billion and they've got a share price to protect, and they're not going to get involved in something like what we're doing. Essentially, they're going to wait and monitor what we're doing, and like everything else in the oil and energy industry, if it works, they're either going to use us or they're going to buy us. That was his exact words.
So they're waiting for you to be the guinea pig to see if it's going to work, and if you fall apart, well, then they can just say we didn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And if it works, they'll just buy it.
And if it works, they'll take the credit.
Exactly. That's the way the industry works. So
that's the way it works.
Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, guys, listen, I guess.
So David, tell us what you think is going to be the future of this.
Well, really, as we spoke about, I think the future is really going to be just opening up a wide market to people that have never had this market, open to them before. And then once you get critical mass, you'll see some of the medium-sized players come in, and as this grows in, an exponential form, you'll get the larger players in. So it's a really smart way to start building a platform from the ground up with the proper risk-reward basis for the people that are involved.
Can you tell us how many coins you've issued?
Alastair, that would be you.
There's like 165 million.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. All right, well, listen, folks, we're running out of time. We're going way over here. So we're going to have to cut this off. Maybe we'll continue this on another podcast with you guys. I hope you guys come on again. But David and Alastair, I really appreciate your time today and being on the show. You guys were great as always.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I absolutely agree. And I wish you every good luck, because this is fabulous what you're doing. And I like guinea pigs.
All right, I guess with that, we're gonna close the podcast. So if everybody out there, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast at mappableusa.com. If you go to that website, just scroll down, you'll see all our syndication sources, and you pick the one you like the best so you'll never miss another episode. And if you want to be a guest on the show, like David and Alastair were today, then just fill out the form on that guest page, and we'll see what we can do about getting you on the show. So once again, thank you all for your help and your subscriptions and all the things that you do. And we'll be at you next week on another Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, folks.